The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Mr. Utterson the lawyer was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. His affections, like ivy, were the growth of time. It was the mark of a modest man to accept his friendly circle ready-made from the hands of opportunity, and that was the lawyer's way. His chief jewel was a kinsman, Mr. Richard Enfield, the well-known man about town. It chanced one day that their way led them down a by-street in a busy quarter of London. Mr. Richard Enfield and the lawyer were on one of their customary Sunday walks, passing down a street where the line of shops was broken by a certain sinister block of building, which bore no window and nothing but a door on the lower story. It was 2 stories high, showed no window, nothing but a door on the lower story, with a blind forehead of discoloured wall. "Apropos of that door," said Mr. Enfield, "I have a very strange story to tell." He recounted how, returning home at some black hour of the morning, he had witnessed a detestable scene. A man, small and very plainly dressed, had collided with a child, a girl of maybe 8 or 10, and had calmly trampled over her body, leaving her screaming on the pavement. Enfield had collared the man, and a crowd had gathered, all as incensed as he. "We were keeping the man twixt us," Enfield related, "and there was the girl's family. The doctor, who had been sent for, was kneeling by the child. He was the usual cut-and-dry apothecary, but his response was singular. 'The man's a perfect monster,' he said. 'I've seen the man, and I've got the story. It's one of those things that isn't possible to describe, and it's one of those things that makes you feel sick. I've taken a loathing to my gentleman at first sight.' The creature, who had a look black and shuddering and small, offered compensation. To avoid a scene that might make his name stink from one end of London to the other, he agreed to pay £100. He went into that very door and returned with £10 in gold and a cheque for the balance, drawn on the account of a well-known man. The cheque was perfectly genuine. "I can't describe him," said Enfield, "and it's not want of memory, for I declare I can see him this moment. He must be deformed somewhere. He gives a strong feeling of deformity, although I couldn't specify the point. He's an extraordinary-looking man, and yet I really can name nothing out of the way. No, sir, I can make no hand of it. I can't describe him. And the strangest part is, the name on the cheque was a name I know." "Who?" asked Utterson. "Well," said Enfield, "it's a name that's often in the papers. The man's name was Hyde." Utterson asked to know more. "I've taken a disrelish to the story, Utterson," Enfield replied. "I make it a rule of mine, the more it looks like Queer Street, the less I ask." "A very good rule too," said the lawyer, "but I have studied the case." "Yes," said Enfield, "I thought you would. But I have studied the case too, and I've come to the conclusion that you're wrong in your facts. The house is not what you suppose. It's a house of a man I know, a man who I believe has gone to the devil." "What? Do you mean Jekyll?" cried Utterson with a sudden start. "Yes, that's the name," said Enfield, "and a very good fellow he is too. A man who does a deal of good in the world." The 2 men walked on in silence for a time, until Utterson said, "It's a bad business. I must look into it." That evening, Mr. Utterson went home to his bachelor house in a state of anxiety. He took from his safe a document, the will of Dr. Henry Jekyll. It directed that in the case of Dr. Jekyll's disappearance or unexplained absence for any period exceeding 3 calendar months, all his possessions were to pass into the hands of his friend and benefactor, Edward Hyde. This document had long been Utterson's eyesore. It offended him both as a lawyer and as a man. And now, Enfield's story had lent a new and dreadful meaning to the clause. The thought of this Hyde, this creature of deformity, Inheriting Jekyll's fortune was monstrous. I thought it was madness, he brooded, and now I begin to fear it is disgrace. He resolved to seek out Dr. Lanyon, one of Jekyll's oldest friends, to see if he knew aught of this connection. Lanyon, a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman with a boisterous and decided manner, received him warmly. I see little of him now, said Lanyon, when Hyde's name was mentioned. It is more than 10 years since Henry Jekyll became too fanciful for me. He began to go wrong in mind. Such unscientific balderdash, Lanyon added, would have estranged Damon and Pythias. Utterson, still unsatisfied, began a patient vigil by the strange door. He felt a strong, almost superstitious curiosity to behold the features of the real Mr. Hyde. At last, one night, his patience was rewarded. A small man approached. "Mr. Hyde, I think—" The other shrank back with a hissing intake of the breath. "That is my name," he said. "What do you want?" "I see you're going in," said the lawyer. "I am an old friend of Dr. Jekyll's, Mr. Utterson of Gaunt Street. You must have heard my name, and meeting you so conveniently, I thought you might admit me." "You will not find Dr. Jekyll. He is from home," replied Hyde, and he produced a key. "Sir," said Utterson, "I beg you to let me see your face." Mr. Hyde, as if with a sudden resolution, stood full in the light. Utterson scanned him. Pale and dwarfish, he gave an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation. He had a displeasing smile, and he spoke with a husky, whispering, and somewhat broken voice. "God bless me," thought Utterson. "The man seems hardly human. Something troglodytic, shall we say?" Hyde vanished into the house. Utterson walked away, deeply troubled. He went round to Dr. Jekyll's main residence, a handsome house, now plunged in darkness. Poole, the butler, admitted him. "Dr. Jekyll is out, sir," said Poole. "He dined with you last." "I saw Mr. Hyde go in by the old dissecting-room door, Poole," said Utterson. "Is Mr. Hyde a person to be trusted?" "Mr. Hyde has a key, sir," said Poole. "He's been here a great deal of late. We have all orders to obey him." Utterson left, his heart heavy. "Poor Harry Jekyll," he thought. "My mind misgives me. He is in deep waters. He was wild when he was young, and now the ghost of some old sin, the cancer of some concealed disgrace." A fortnight later, Dr. Jekyll gave one of his pleasant dinners. Utterson stayed behind, as was his custom. Jekyll was a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of 50, with something of a slyish cast, perhaps, but every mark of capacity and kindness. The lawyer led the conversation to the will. "I have been learning something of young Hyde," he said. Jekyll's handsome face grew pale. "I do not care to hear more," said he. "I am in a very strange position, Utterson." "My position is a very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking." "Jekyll," said Utterson, "you know me. I am a man to be trusted. Make a clean breast of this in confidence, and I make no doubt I can get you out of it." "You do not understand my position," returned the doctor, with a certain incoherency of manner. "I am painfully situated. The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde. I beg of you to let this matter sleep. I trust you, but I trust you to this extent. I would trust you with my life if I were in danger, but I am not. And if I am taken away, Utterson, I wish you to see that my poor Hyde gets his rights." Utterson saw it was useless and left. Nearly a year later, in October, London was startled by a crime of singular ferocity. A maidservant, living alone in a house not far from the river, was looking out of her window before going to bed. She saw an aged and beautiful gentleman with white hair walking. He was met by another smaller man. The maid recognized this second man as a Mr. Hyde, who had once visited her master. Hyde, listening with an ill-contained impatience, suddenly broke out in a great flame of anger. He brandished his heavy cane, and the next moment, with ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows, under which the bones were audibly shattered. The maid fainted. At the scene, a purse and a gold watch were found on the victim, but no identification. However, a sealed and stamped envelope was also found, addressed to Mr. Utterson. The police brought it to the lawyer the next morning. The victim was identified as Sir Danvers Carew. Utterson, struck with horror, recognised the cane. "I think I can take you to the man's address," he said to the inspector. They drove to the dismal quarter of Soho where Hyde lived. A fog was settling. The house, in a narrow and muddy street, had an air of prolonged and sordid negligence. An old woman, with an evil face, smoothed by hypocrisy, answered the door. Hyde was not at home. He had not been there for 2 months. The inspector and Utterson searched his rooms. They were furnished with a taste and luxury, but looked as if hurriedly ransacked. In the ashes of the fireplace, they found the burnt remains of a cheque-book. And behind a door, they found the other half of the fatal cane. "This seals it," said the inspector. "Mr. Hyde is the man." Later that day, Utterson went to Dr. Jekyll's house. He was admitted by Poole and taken to the doctor's private cabinet, a room built above the old dissecting room. Jekyll was sitting there, looking deadly sick. "Have you heard the news?" asked Utterson as he sat down. "The bells have been ringing," said Jekyll, "but I have not heard them." "Utterson, I swear to God I will never set eyes on him again. I am done with him in this world. It is all at an end. And indeed he does not want my help. You do not know him as I do. He is safe. He is quite safe. Mark my words. He will never more be heard of." The lawyer listened gloomily. "You have not, I hope, been mad enough to hide him." "Utterson, I swear to God," cried the doctor. "I swear to God, I will never set eyes on him again." Jekyll then produced a letter, which he said had been delivered by hand, signed Edward Hyde. It stated that Hyde was safe, and that Jekyll should not fear for him. Utterson asked to see the envelope, but Jekyll claimed to have burned it. Utterson took the letter. He met Poole on his way out. "Poole," he said, "was a letter delivered here today?" "No, sir," said Poole, "nothing but the post." This discrepancy troubled Utterson. He went to his head clerk, Mr. Guest, a great student of handwriting. Guest compared Hyde's letter with an invitation from Dr. Jekyll. "There's a rather singular resemblance," said Guest. "The two hands are in many points identical, only differently sloped." "What?" cried Utterson. "Henry Jekyll forge for a murderer?" His blood ran cold in his veins. Time ran on. The hunt for Hyde was fruitless. But a great change came over Dr. Jekyll. He emerged from his seclusion, renewed his relations with his friends, and for 2 months was busy, was much in the open air. He was happy. Then on the 8th of January, Utterson was dining with Jekyll and Lanyon. All seemed well, but on the 12th, and again on the 14th, Utterson was denied admittance. The doctor was confined to the house and saw no one. He went to Dr. Lanyon, only to be shocked by the change in his friend. Lanyon had his death warrant written legibly upon his face. The rosy man had grown pale. His flesh had fallen away. He was visibly balder and older. Lanyon spoke of some deep-seated terror of the mind. "I have had a shock," said Lanyon, "and I shall never recover, but I will not speak of it. I am a doomed man. I have had a shock, I say. I shall never recover." "Jekyll is ill too," said Utterson. At the sound of Jekyll's name, Lanyon's face changed. "I am quite done with that person," he said. I beg that you will spare me any allusion to one whom I must regard as dead." Utterson wrote to Jekyll, asking for an explanation. Jekyll's reply was dark. "I am the chief of sinners," he wrote. "I am the chief of sufferers also. I could not, even if I would, explain my state. I am doomed to a dreadful shipwreck." Within a few weeks, Dr. Lanyon died. After the funeral, Utterson opened a letter Lanyon had left for him. Inside was another sealed envelope, inscribed, "Not to be opened till the death or disappearance of Dr. Henry Jekyll." Utterson, a man of honour, put the letter in his safe, though his curiosity was burning. Mr. Utterson and Mr. Enfield were on one of their Sunday walks. Their route took them past the sinister door. They remarked on its connection to the Jekyll-Hyde mystery. "Well," said Enfield, "that story's at an end at any rate. We shall never see more of Mr. Hyde." They decided to stop at Dr. Jekyll's main house to see if they might get a glimpse of him. They were told he was in, but would see no one. They went round to the courtyard and stood below the window of his cabinet. The window was open, and there, taking the air with an infinite sadness, like some disconsolate prisoner, Utterson saw Dr. Jekyll. "Jekyll!" he cried. "I trust you are better." "I am very low, Utterson," replied the doctor, dismally. "Very low. It will not last long, thank God." They spoke for a moment. But as Utterson was suggesting he come down and join them for a walk, the smile was struck from his face and succeeded by an expression of such abject terror and despair as froze the very blood of the two gentlemen below. The window was instantly thrust down. Utterson and Enfield turned and left the court without a word. They walked on, pale and silent, each in his own thoughts. God forgive us," said Mr. Utterson. One evening, Mr. Utterson was sitting by his fire when he was startled by a visit from Poole, Dr. Jekyll's butler. The man was pale and ghastly. "Mr. Utterson," said Poole, "there is something wrong." "What do you mean?" cried the lawyer. "I can't bear it, sir," said Poole. "I'm afraid. I've been afraid for about a week, and I can't bear it any more." He stood, wringing his hands. "Sir, I believe there has been foul play." "Foul play?" cried Utterson. "What do you mean?" "I daren't say, sir," was the answer. "But will you come with me and see for yourself?" They drove through the wild, cold March night to Jekyll's house. The servants were huddled together in the hall, like a flock of sheep. Poole led Utterson to the cabinet. He knocked. "Mr. Utterson, sir, asking to see you." A voice from within, a changed voice, answered. "Tell him I cannot see anyone." "Sir," said Poole, "that is not my master's voice. It's the voice of Mr. Hyde. My master," he added, "was a tall, fine man, but this thing, is a dwarf." Poole recounted a week of terror. The voice from the cabinet had been crying out for a certain pure chemical. What was delivered was always rejected as not pure. "I have seen him," Poole whispered, his voice sinking. "I saw him for a moment when he came out of the cabinet to the door. 'Twas a mask. Sir, if that was my master, why did he cry out like a rat and run from me?" "This is beyond me," said Utterson. "Poole, I believe your master has been murdered. We must break down that door." They armed themselves, Poole with an axe, Utterson with a poker. "Jekyll," cried Utterson, "I demand to see you. If you will not open, I shall use force." There was no reply but a dreadful, weeping sound. "Down with the door, Poole," said Utterson. The axe fell 5 times. The door crashed open. They stood in the quiet cabinet, lit by the lamp. On the floor lay the body of a man, still twitching. It was Edward Hyde, dressed in clothes too large for him. In his hand was a crushed vial. He was dead by his own hand. They searched the room. On the business table lay a large envelope addressed to Mr. Utterson. It contained several documents. One was a new will in Jekyll's hand, leaving everything to Utterson. Another was a brief note, dated that day. "My dear Utterson," it read, "when this shall fall into your hands, I shall have disappeared. Read first the narrative which Lanyon warned me he would place in your hands, and if you care to hear more, turn to the confession of your unworthy and unhappy friend, Henry Jekyll." Utterson returned home and, with a solemn awe, opened the two documents that would solve the mystery. First, Dr. Lanyon's narrative. It told of a night when Lanyon had received a registered letter from Henry Jekyll, filled with the most extravagant appeals. Jekyll begged him, as a matter of life and death, to go to his cabinet, fetch a specific drawer containing powders, a file and a paper book, and return with it to his own consulting room. At midnight, a messenger from Jekyll would arrive. Lanyon, believing his friend mad, had nonetheless followed the instructions. At midnight, a small, repulsive man arrived. It was Hyde. He was dressed in clothes enormously too large for him. Hyde was agitated, a curious combination of life and languor. He seized the drawer. "Have you a graduated glass?" he asked. He mixed the powders and the red tincture from the phial. The mixture fumed and changed colour. "And now," said Hyde, "will you be wise? Will you be satisfied? Or has the greed of curiosity too much command of you? Think before you answer, for it shall be done as you decide. As you decide, you shall be left as you were before, and neither richer nor wiser, unless the sense of service rendered to a man in mortal distress be a kind of riches of the soul. Or, if you shall so prefer to choose, a new province of knowledge and new avenues to fame and power shall be laid open to you, and your sight shall be blasted by a prodigy to stagger the unbelief of Satan." "Sir," said Lanyon, "you speak in enigmas." He chose to see. Hyde drank the potion. A cry followed. He reeled, staggered, clutched at the table. His features seemed to melt and alter. And then, Lanyon wrote, before my eyes, pale and fainting and half gasping and groping before him with his hands, like a man restored from death, there stood Henry Jekyll. Lanyon's narrative concluded, "My life is shaken to its roots. Sleep has left me. The deadliest terror sits by me. I cannot, even in memory, dwell on it without a start of horror. I will not write more. As for the moral turpitude that man unveiled to me, even with tears of penitence, I cannot, even in memory, dwell on it." Finally, Utterson read the last, terrible document. "I was born," Jekyll wrote, "to a large fortune, endowed besides with excellent parts, inclined by nature to industry, and I had a profound duplicity of life." He was not a hypocrite. His two sides were in dead earnest. He was radically twofold. He had long dreamed of separating these two natures. If each, he wrote, could be housed in separate identities, life would be relieved of all that was unbearable. The unjust might go his way, delivered from the aspirations and remorse of his more upright twin, and the just could walk steadfastly on his upward path, no longer exposed to disgrace and penitence by the hands of this extraneous evil. His transcendental studies led him to a drug that could shake the fortress of identity. He prepared the potion. With a strong glow of courage, he drank it. The most racking pangs succeeded, a grinding in the bones, deadly nausea, and a horror of the spirit that cannot be exceeded at the cost of birth or death. And then I came to myself. I felt younger, lighter, happier in body. Within I was conscious of a heady recklessness. I knew myself, at the first breath of this new life, to be more wicked, tenfold more wicked, sold a slave to my original evil. And the thought, in that moment, braced and delighted me like wine. This, he wrote, was Edward Hyde. He had chosen a small and a less developed body for Hyde because this evil side had been less exercised than his good. At first he controlled the change. As Jekyll, he was a man who concealed his pleasures. As Hyde, he was a man who sought out and indulged his own. Hyde was pure evil, but the balance began to shift. I had but to drink the cup, he wrote, to doff at once the body of the celebrated professor and to assume, like a thick cloak, that of Edward Hyde. But the return journey was laborious. Then, one night, I awoke to realities. I had gone to bed Henry Jekyll. I had awakened Edward Hyde. This spontaneous transformation terrified him. He resolved to choose Jekyll, and for 2 months he lived a life of such severity as he had never known. But the longing for Hyde grew insatiable. One night, in a moment of moral weakness, he took the drug again. Hyde, long caged, came out roaring. That was the night of the Carew murder. Horrified, Jekyll threw away the key to the back door and broke out in a fever of penitence. He was safe, he thought, until the incident at the window. He was sitting in the park, indulging in a reverie, when the horrible transformation seized him without the drug. He was now Edward Hyde, a hunted murderer far from his cabinet. He wrote the frantic letter to Lanyon. It was as Hyde that he fled to Lanyon's. The terror of that night, witnessed by Lanyon, was absolute. He was a slave to the phenomenon. He became Hyde as soon as he dozed in his chair. He ran out of the original salts for his mixture. His curse was that he did not even know the nature of the impurity in the first batch that had made his potion work. All new purchases were useless. He was confined to the cabinet, writing his confession, knowing his doom. The drug, he wrote, had no discriminating action. It was neither diabolical nor divine. It but shook the doors of the prison house of my disposition. It was the curse of mankind that these incongruous faggots were thus bound together, that in the agonized womb of consciousness these polar twins should be continuously struggling. His end was near. This is the last time, he wrote, that Henry Jekyll can think his own thoughts. As I lay down the pen and proceed to seal up my confession, I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end.